Hello, and welcome to Painters Motivating Painters Reviews, where for this month only, you get to listen to not only my terrible audio quality, but also this manky cold that I'm suffering from. So apologies for both those things, but it doesn't matter. We've got an important job to do. We have many great pieces of miniature art from our monthly Facebook event, and we're here to give constructive feedback to try and help people take their painting to the next stage. So we're just going to go straight in. We've got this amazing diorama here from Alexis Bonaire. Really great work as usual, Alexis. I absolutely love it. Big fan of dioramas, and I think you've done a really great job on this. There's a lot we could talk about, so I'm just going to focus on the overall layout of the diorama and as well kind of how you use the light. And I'm sure Jim will have stuff to say about specific painting on the individual guys and things like that as well. So first of all, yeah, I think it's a really good layout. I always think when you're doing a diorama and you're trying to tell a story, you should think of it as being like actors up on a stage, and you're viewing it from the audience's perspective. And like that, you can see you've got kind of three standout figures here for me. There's the main guy, obviously. There's a guy behind him with the bolter, and then there's a guy at front, and you can tell kind of they're all two of them are kind of facing this way, but they're also facing the audience like you would if you were an actor in theater. And then the guy at the front with the big horn, where he's like turned almost the whole way around. But that kind of has the same effect where you can see what he's doing, and also gives this really great sense of movement. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but like the way you've got the guy behind the demon, it kind of goes up to him and then drops down and sweeps across. Like you really get the feeling like they're all rushing across the battlefield. And with the way that guy's like moving off the piece, I think it's really, really effective. The rest of the guys in the middle, they come out as more kind of like a mob of dudes, which I think is fine. Like, you've got the demon guy directing them, and it's just this like wave of chaos washing down on everyone. But there's two guys who are nearest the camera who I thought were a little bit confusing. They're like the mutant guys, they have very bright skin tone, like magenta, and they're lit up by that blue light, and they're pretty eye catching. But when you look at them, it's hard to tell what is going on with them from the main view. Because obviously with a diorama piece like this, you kind of hard to get everything to work from every angle. But from the main view, which you've said is the first picture here, those guys, they're kind of turned away from the camera and they've got like weird mutated limbs and things. And it took me ages to figure out even where their heads actually are. So there's kind of two things you could do here. You could either think about the model choice. Maybe you don't want to have such odd big front, or just try and draw less attention to them because you have very bright colors on them. Like either they're just part of this mob of guys, in which case they're not important, so you don't need to highlight them up so much, or if they are important, you need to do something to show us what's going on with them. I think as well, you've done a great job in terms of your lighting setup. Set a course by Ben Comets. He was talking about this. Or if you have two light sources, you want to make sure that your piece looks good from the point where both the light sources are on it, and then from the point of view of one light source, you should be able to see a little bit of the other one, and then the reverse is true. And I think you've done that very well. I think maybe in the kind of front view from the daylight, I'm going to say side, you could have a little bit more of your blue rim light coming in, like maybe on the underneath of the demon guy's wing or something, just because you kind of want to have a bit of that everywhere, a bit of both the lights if possible. I think the reverse side where it's like dark and the blue light's the main light is really, really good because we can see that there is sunlight coming in. And I think the way you've done that, where they're coming out of the darkness and into the light, is very good as well. And then you obviously run this issue, which is common in this kind of setup, where you have the back of it, and you have the same problem where if you're at the theater and you stood behind the actors and they're being lit from the front, you're not going to see anything that's going on really. So you kind of have two choices here. I think the demon guy, he looks like he's being kind of lit by some light that's bounced back around. That looks perfectly fine. But all of the terrain down the bottom is just kind of painted like dark, like we're not meant to be able to see it. But you can never paint something so that we can't see it. So like basically your options are to, if you don't want that stuff there, you should cut it all off and smooth it all out, have the base go up to the figure's feet, and then there's nothing there to look at, which would be fine. But obviously, since it is there now, there's no reason you couldn't have that blue light here as well, because at this point you're behind everything. So you know, you have the blue light coming from say 120 degrees, you could just have another source of that just to give some definition to those rocks, just to give us something interesting to look at. And then that might let you do a little bit more rim lighting on the front view as well. Because obviously the back in this case is less important, but you do want to have, you can't paint something out of existence when it's a miniature. So you're going to have to give us some light to show, so we can tell kind of what's going on here. So yeah, I think the main figure is fine, and the rocks could do with just something else to give them a bit more definition. But it's a really, really strong piece. I really, really enjoy it altogether, and not easy to do as well with this many figures and all these different lights and everything going on. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, it's another fantastic piece. Well done, Alexis. I really enjoyed the OSL effect. I think you've rendered that very nicely. But yeah, you could possibly do some more at the back, as Matt says. I had the same sort of thought. So yeah, the back doesn't need to be as interesting as the front, granted, but I do feel like a little of something there would be nice. Especially because it's a diorama, and it's a very 360 experience a lot of the time. Excuse me. Yeah, the same goes for the dudes. Great level of like detail on all of the mob that's at the front. I love the use of color that you've got in there. You balanced it really, really well. There's an instance here which is superb, like OSL on this guy here, this chest. Very, very nice. But then over on this one, he seems to stop very abruptly, like it's affecting his arm and his sort of rib cage here on the side, but then it just stops on his armor plate and his like leather sort of harness that he's wearing. So that jumped out as a little bit abrupt where that finishes. And you can also tell like the light intensity, like I'm not sure where this light source is supposed to sort of emanate from, but it's a very similar intensity and tone, and both of these guys are at different distances away from the edge of the piece, so maybe just consider like softening this one so it doesn't go up this high. Maybe that would sell a little bit better that way. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's defined very, very nicely. It's very smooth. As I said before, great balance of color, so like the actual models themselves are really awesome. For the big demon prince or whatever it is at the back, I thought you could. The only thing really that jumped out could be like picking out the little veins that are in the wing membranes a little bit more. It looks really striking from this angle. It's really, really good. I love the way you've painted these with that like inner heat coming from inside the wing. It's really, really good. But look, on the back as well, it's another sort of example how the veins are kind of they've been sculpted there. So I feel like picking those out would be really helpful. There's also some veins like on the armor for some weird reason because it's demon-y, and why not, I suppose. So yeah, just a few extra highlights on the veins would be cool. And then the only other thing that I thought could maybe use a bit of love was the muzzle flashes. I don't think you've got quite enough like travel in there, so that is to say it's a bit too orange for too long. I'd tried like darkening down towards the red end of the spectrum and then like a very sort of ruddy brown right at the tips. Just so you get that sort of full travel of colour. They just look a little bit washed out. But for the most part, everything else is absolutely beautiful once again. So, yeah, congratulations once again, Alexis. Thank you for submitting. Really, really nice piece. And now Facebook's bagged out. That's a nice early one. Thank you very much. Let's go back down to the bottom. Loading, 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 loading. There we go. Right, sorry about that. Big Mech Morka next, with Orc Marine, painted in the mix of heavy metal style and cell shading. Want some advice on how to paint better blues, how to improve the green skin, and advice on the leather. So firstly, this looks really cool. I love the cell shading thing. I think it's a really effective way to paint minis, really like cartoon kind of feel to it. And you've done very well. The blue, I think, looks very, very nice. Like the vibrancy of it, the weathering, how you've got like the classic, like just straight black chipping and scratching, but then you've also managed to get some rust in there, and it looks very convincing as well. So it's really, really cool. So with blue, The answer really to painting better blue is the same as painting any other colour really, and it's just more contrast. So you could push your shadow a little bit deeper, and you could certainly take your highlights a little bit higher as well. That being said, with this sort of style though, I don't think you really need to. I think you're in a really, really strong place with this. You could maybe take like a lighter blue and just do some very tiny like edge highlights on the top. You said heavy metal style, so you could pick out some. I mean, there's one there on the top of the axe which seems to be a little bit brighter, that sort of thing. So it's missing from the armour here, and it's missing from sort of the leg plates here. You could do a little bit on top of the feet, and you don't have to do it everywhere. If you highlight everything, then so forth, you have highlighted nothing. So be selective about where you put them. But I think you're pretty good place for blue, really. I mean, yes, you could say smoother, but hey, that just comes down to practice and preference as well. I really like the way this looks, to be honest, with the cell shading and like the mix with the heavy metal. But it's more like the weathering, the heavy metal style, rather than highlighting. So I think it's really good. I ain't got much more of a push on that. So yeah, I love the armor and the weathering looks great. For the skin, a couple of tricks for the skin is again with highlighting. So contrast wise, it looks like you've got a bit of yellow on the little goblin dude that's on his pack. It goes like more to the sort of yellow. And I can see that you've got some yellow in there, but it's like it's the same on the top as it is on the bottom. So you want to reserve like this yellowy tone for stuff that's upward facing. That is to say, like on the top of the arm, but also actual independent muscle structures themselves. He's not got a lot of them, but the goblin does. But it's sort of spread around very evenly. So just watch out for that. You can go. It would be like on the top sides of muscles facing up. There is a little bit of it there. So I think you're on the right track. It's just going to be a case of practicing, smoothing it out, and then also darkening like the undersides of things, because he's in a very sort of generalized, zenithal light. So push the shadows as well to push contrast. That make brighters will appear brighter if the shadows are deeper. So try that. Another way of getting life into the skin is using actual skin tones and like red, pinky things. On knuckles, between the fingers, elbows as well, give it a bit of life. Nose, ears, like places like where you would expect to see naturally a bit more blood flow. Our brains are just naturally wired to recognize it like that. So try that next time you do it. So like good example would be on the goblin dude, like a pinkier nose and ears, like fleshy kind of knuckles in between the fingers, that sort of thing. So that really helps with the skin. And then I forgot the last one. Oh, the leather. So I thought the leather looked pretty good. The belt was the best. So this one here. So the tones and the scratches and the scuffing and stuff looks best on the belt. But I think you're in the right place. Maybe the tone is a little bit bright on the brightest one. So what you could do is get some what's it called? I think it's called Snakebite leather. It's a contrast paint from Games Workshop, or Citadel rather. Use that as like a glaze to go after you've got to this stage. Go over it with some of that, water it down a little bit because it is pretty pigment dense and it can stain very, very quickly. So yeah, I think all this is lacking is just like a sort of a mid-tone glaze to kind of bring it all together. But the colours that you've got to start with, I think, are really good. So yeah, give that a go, glazing in, just to tone that down a little bit, and I think you'll be there. So yeah, really like it. Nice one for submitting. I'll hand you over to Matt now. Thank you.
Yeah, this guy's awesome. Like, it's such a cool, and the style that you use is really appropriate for it, where it almost looks like he's in cosplay, like as a Space Marine, and he's like inked up all his armor, and it's got that like really chunky look to it, like that kind of cosplay armor looks like, and it's really appropriate for orcs as well. That they're just kind of cartoony and stuff. So just one thing I would say is just be a little bit careful maybe on your kind of line work. So especially on his left arm with all the muscles there. So when you think about in an illustration, they have cells where they have like the arm is here, and then they can have like the top is lit one way, and like a section of it is darker, but they have lines as well. So like you have quite thick lines kind of between the muscles, whereas in a in a manga or whatever, they'd be incredibly thin pencil lines, or they'd be actual like chunks that have a particular shape to them. So that's just like a little pointer there. And as well, yeah, Jim said about using red. That would be very cool. Like even having like glazes of red into the skin, just like almost at random, just adds an extra layer of depth because it's like complementary to the green. And you could even try doing some very thin, like filtery kind of things of red over the shadows in the armor, just to make them be like warm shadows and they'd be a little bit darker. But I think, as Jim said, like have this kind of like very bright but pretty flat look to the armor with all the weathering in looks great for the style that you're doing. So keep it up. It's super awesome. Looking forward to seeing any more if you have them coming. Next up, we got another Alexis, first time submitting. Thanks very much. And it's the Witchers from the manga kind of jewel thing going on here. Very cool. Like for suggestions about painting cloths and textures in general. So first of all, great work. It's a cool looking piece. And I think that you did a good job with your little freehands on the clothing. And I think it's a nice simple pattern and it's quite effective with these like stars or crosses or whatever. So that's good for me in terms of texture. I think the wings, I really like the way the wings on the Tengu or whatever kind of guy this is, Birdman. I like the way you've got this like, it goes from like light purple to dark purple and then out to green and then to bright green. It's really cool looking. You might have a little bit of more highlights on, so it looks like your highlights are at the end of the feathers all the way down on the green parts, but I think maybe just the tops of some of the feathers that are lower down would look good. You just have like a very thin line across them, kind of like you've done at the longer feathers at the end, just because that's the part that's facing up. So the highlight should travel further along the top edge of the feather, and it would just give a little bit more definition in there as well. And then I wasn't 100% sure what the deal is with his weapon, like what material it's meant to be made of. It looks a little bit like wood, but maybe it's meant to be like rusted metal. But if it's rusted metal, then it's got too much white in it because like steel is kind of like a dark gray, and then you have white highlights for reflections. So just to have a think about that. And I was a little bit confused as well because he's got that fan of what looks like it could be leaves, or maybe they're feathers because he has green feathers as well. So again, that was kind of making me think: is it wood? Is that like plant stuff growing out of it? Maybe it's like a macawattle, which is like a sharpened ore kind of thing. So, and if it is wood, there's wood grain texture you can include if that's the way you're going with that. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was that the cloud the guy is resting on is very similar in color and tone and everything to the Witcher's trousers. Like there's like an angle where you see the Witcher from behind, they almost blend into each other. So you want to kind of avoid that because you've got two different, like smoke is a different texture to trousers. So like you can't have them painted the same way. So I'd go for much more of like a gray for the cloud. It could be a gray blue and then like with kind of like light gray highlights as opposed to having it be this like almost denim blue kind of color, whether it's a cloud or water or whatever. Just because you're using those colors somewhere else, like you could use those if his pants weren't the same colors, if that makes sense. But it's a cool looking piece. I've never seen anything like it before. So thanks a million for submitting. Hopefully that was helpful to you, Jim.
Yeah, much the same. Certainly about differentiating the smoke and the trousers. That was the number one thing for me. Because the purple is also very much the same, which isn't necessarily a problem, but I think it's because the blue is so close as well, it's making these two an issue as well. So definitely do something with this smoke. That would be very, very good. I think that's a massive evil mold line, just like above the hip. So watch out for those. If you're not experienced in filling those up, well, firstly, check out YouTube because there's loads of good ways of doing it, loads of awesome products. But if you're stuck for anything completely, like to get in really small areas is really, really hard. So the two best ways to do that are by making sprue goo, which is using Tamiya extra thin cement, which melts the plastic. So you just put up bits of waste sprue in there and let it turn to goop, and that's a brilliant gap filler. Or varnish is even easier because it's just straight out of the pot. So literally just slap it in there let the varnish harden, do it 2 or 3 times, give a bit of a file back, and that will be gone. But obviously you've got to do this at the priming stage, ideally. So yeah, watch out for mold lines. I agree with Matt about the weapon. I thought it looked more like metal than wood, but still it needs more shadow contrast in it, so get some dark tones in there. I think it goes up bright enough, but it would look an awful lot more like metal if you had some shadows cast in there. And then for like texture, I mean, there's loads of ways you can do it. It looks like you've done a little bit, so it's just more of the same, really. I mean, depending on the actual print, sometimes dry brushing is a really good way of doing it. That just brings out texture anyway, and then you can sort of glaze in to soften that texture out as it gets sort of more into shadow, because you don't see the texture so much in shadowed areas. So if you were like dry brushing these pantaloons here, and you ended up with texture down here that you didn't want, you'd glaze that out, because you'd only really see the texture in the highlights. You can do it by stippling. You can do it by sort of scratching and hashing. There's a few ways of doing it. So it's just about like getting a good reference photo is good. Someone else that's done something similar, and use that sort of as a bit of a measuring stick for your own work. But yeah, in general, keep it to highlighted areas. Glaze it out towards the shadows, and yeah, just you can mix and match as well between the stippling or hashing or dry brushing. You can mix all of them together for a really cool effect. So yeah, have fun with that. Really cool piece overall. So yeah, thank you very much, Alexis 2, Alexis Kofas. Moving up to Duarte has returned with, I believe this is Jax from Mortal Kombat, I think. Yes. First time tying Darkskin. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yes, he's a very, very, very formidable Mortal Kombat combatant. So anyway, I ramble. I'd like some help with the Darkskin and with the TMM. Appreciate the comments. Thank you very much for your time. You're more than welcome. So with the skin, I think you're in a really good place, like tonality and like placement of the highlights. So tops of the muscle structures. There's a little bit of islanding going on, and I think it's because the deep shadow between the muscles is quite thick in some places, not everywhere. It's more obvious like around the abs. So I think if you were to bring more of the mid-tone and the highlight colour like more towards the tops and just thin these really dark shadowed sections, that would really help. And then also if you can do it like the alba, like this line right down the middle of the abs, that's actually a highlight, like gathers in there quite when muscles are this well defined. So that'll help sort of structure that abdominal region really quite nicely. The scars, you could go with like what's going on around his arms, like this bruising and stuff. I think you could incorporate some of those tones into the scarring that's been done around the front of his body. And then generally speaking, just a brighter highlights. You want to go in with something, quite sunny, quite ivory, thin, but just push these up, push the highlights right to the top of the muscle. So it is quite bright here, but it needs to be like more sort of saturated to give off that sort of sheen effect on it. And that'll be really nice then. Let's see what else I had. Great job on the bones and the teeth and the eyes. So like the tones that you've used are really subtle, like in contrast and smoothness. It's great. I love what you've done with the teeth. So many people just go in far too bright with teeth or don't separate them. So you've done a great job, like with the whole face in general. Really, there's loads of life in it. If you can, a tiny little dot of white, like breaking between the black pupil and the blue iris, would give it the actual like the life light and make him look way more alive, like instantly. So see if you can get that done. One of the best ways to do that is to get an old, if you've got one. If not, just get one and make one. They're brilliant. So the smallest brush ever, like 3-0 brush, and you just cut the very tip off, so it's just this tiny little square end. Doop, makes an awesome little dot brush. And then practice, because you can still get it wrong. So that's it for the skin. Very nice overall. And then for the metals, I think the answer is shadow. So it goes up, it's got a nice tone to it, like he has got very polished, like almost chrome metal arms. So I think you're in a strong place with like the medium tone of it. It looks like you've washed it and got some like splotching going on. So I'd try and smooth that out. But then to make it again look even brighter, you've got to push like the shadows down like to virtually black. You'll see it on Chrome quite a lot. That the shadows literally go to black because it's that reflective. And then you could potentially use like an interference color as well to sell the fact that it's that reflective. It's lights bouncing off other things that are around it and then causing interference colors in the like the polished chrome. So I thought with this one, with the skin tones and like the gold tones that everything's going on, I thought the purple would be a solid choice for that. So it'd just be like on the undersides, that would be shaded pretty much to black. And then in some areas, you just have a little bit of purple glazed in, just to give it a little bit of an extra layer of interest to it. And it just set the whole composition off a little bit, I think. So yeah, just push around for that, and just be careful with your shades in future, because yeah, they have sort of where's the back like most noticeable on the black, like these brush strokes and the pooling and stuff. So yeah, watch out for that. But otherwise, do I say looking really, really good? So thank you for submitting. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, this is great, especially for your first try. Like, I think especially around the head and the face, very strong. Like Jim said, a little bit of kind of islanding going on with muscles toward like the abdomen. But I think the sculpt isn't like incredibly good. Like his belly button's in the wrong place if you look carefully. Also, as a connoisseur of shirtless men that all miniature painters must be, I have an issue with him having this ripped abs. But when you look at the back and he's got love handles, you're like, that doesn't work like that. No, it does not. And yeah, and having all the like the scarification as well, it kind of like breaks everything up. So it's hard to get the anatomy like perfect when you've got like all these interfering lines and things there. One thing for me was I thought like the little dots of white on his tongue were like a little bit too intense. Like it's nice to have them in there, like it's like reflection from saliva. But I don't know if it's that I'd probably use the same color used in the eyes. It's kind of hard to tell like whether it just looks really bright because it's in a dark area, or if it actually is. But like definitely soften it out a little bit if you want to bring it up to that light of a reflection point. And I agree with Jim on that. You like the metals look really good to me. I love the definition between the kind of gold cabling or brass or whatever, and the kind of to me it looks kind of like steel of the armor, but very 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 polished steel. And I'd recommend there's a video by Little Plastic People. There's a fella off EMP as well. And he did one where he's painted up his knight, which won some Golden Demon a year or two ago. And he actually has like interference in all the metals, have like purple and green, but like real subtly. You don't notice it. But again, as Jim said, it gives you that extra level of like, yeah, if it's reflective, it's got to reflect some sort of color from something. And even if it's very subtle, like that you're not even consciously aware that they're having some little like layer of color into their metals, is just the extra kind of icing on the cake there. But great work, Duarte. Thanks a million for submitting. Next up, we've got Adam Talbot. Entered this piece into Salute 51. Tried very hard. Great job. Didn't do great in the show. Want feedback on what you can do to bring it up. Well, as we always say, how well you do in a competition depends on who the competition was. So, you can have the best piece. You can have the second best piece in the whole world, and the guy who had the best piece in the whole world shows up that time. So, don't beat yourself up over it. I think these are really well painted looking Marines. For me, the number one. So, starting off with the good things, I think the helmets look really nice. I love the helmet, the red helmet on the sergeant or whatever he's called, and the red of the guns, the bolters, looks really good. I like the NMM. You've got NMM gold. You've got on the shoulder pads and the chest eagles. Looks a little bit cartoony on the belt buckles. Reminds me of like the 90s X-Men cartoon, that kind of like stylized gold they use in cartoons a lot. So that's where you're going. We're fine. But it just seems like maybe their belts would be a little bit darker because they're like under their chest armor and stuff. But the thing that kind of stands out, the biggest kind of area for improvement is the blue, which is kind of unfortunate because it's also just the biggest area of the miniatures overall. Because it looks like what you've done is you kind of you have more highlights on the face than on the other parts of it. But like when you look at like their knee pads and their shins, they have all these big geometric shapes, and you've really just got your base color and then like a half tone above that. There's no like reflective, there's no edge highlighting on the top of their knee pads. And like if you're trying to save maximum highlights from the face, then you want to have the legs go darker and like on the armor go darker, and it doesn't run down that way as well. And one of the effects you get from this is if you have really soft lighting, it makes the material look like it's like soft and porous or something, like it's made of foam or plastic or something like that, and makes them look a bit like a toy. Whereas if you did really hard edging on it, it tells us it's a hard, smooth surface, which is, you know, kind of the look that we're going for here. Certain things you get away with more, like so for example, the leather pouches and stuff have kind of face tone and a bit of shadow in them. But because they're not super important, that's fine. Obviously, everything depends on how much time you got for your piece. But I think probably made one of the reasons why, like, there are elements of these pieces that are like, these characters who are extremely well painted, but the main element of them being the armor, having, you know, not as much of a run of contrast, might have been why you didn't place or whatever. Or I could have just I've been because, you know, everyone else was there with such a high standard. Like I was at Golden Demon, literally looking at the case and being like, yep, I mean, out of these 30 models, mine would have been like 29th, 30th, whatever. And then the only other thing I think is that the base is a little bit. I like the way you've done all the tufts, like a whole field of tufts. But I find that people tend to do them like that's how grass actually grows. But I don't know if you could maybe like trim it a little bit back so that they're less tuft shaped, so it's more like a lawn. And the stone is a bit grey, which is just a little bit uninteresting. So that's like fairly easy to fix with some pigments or whatever. But like I said, these are like really well painted and like have a very high standard. And I'm sure that the competition standard was just very high. Like I love the eye lenses, all these little details, little globy things. But you know, that's the ropes. Jim?
Completely agree with all of the things, especially lenses. Like the lenses were an absolute triumph. They look gorgeous. Even the ones on the bolters, man, beautiful. Barrel drilling, like, oh, really, really beautiful. Love it. The red is the best color on these. So bolters and Sergeant's lid. Oh, what's going on there? Facebook's bugging out. Why have you done this to me? There we go. But yeah, I completely agree with Matt. The blue's got to go way further, man. It is like the main colour. And yes, it's highlighted. It's very subtle, heavy metal style. There is a little bit of some shading that's gone on in the recesses, but you've just got to take it further, man. It's as simple as that, I'm afraid. You can obviously do it. So, yeah, crack on. Like, bring the blue up to the standard of the red. And, yeah, these things are going to look absolutely outstanding. Really, really nice, clean, smooth. You know, there's an awful lot going for these. It's just a little lackluster on the blue, and that sounds harsh, but when you've done the red so exquisitely, then, yeah, you've got no defence for yourself, Adam. You've just got to get in there and do it. And the same goes for the leather stuff, man. Get some scratching, you know, around the edges, flaps, and they'll look amazing. You know they will look amazing. It does take effort. I know it's long. I paint a lot of Space Marines, and I know how long the power armor is, but it's so worth it, man. So buckle up and get that edge highlight and brush out again, and they will look smashing, I'm sure. And oh yes, definitely some more colour in the rocks. I agree with that too. So yeah, go ahead. They will look awesome when you finish them off. And yes, as Matt says, don't beat yourself up about the competition because it just depends who turns up on the day. So good luck with the next one, man. Stephen Banks finally finished another mammoth project. First proper attempt at freehand. Not bothered about heraldic markings. Just want to look good. Fair play to you. I'm of the same cloth that you are. Going for clean transitions. Any feedback? Wanted to add more interest to the base after the last one. And then forgot the banner, but never mind. Wow, striking, loud, powerful colours. And I think it really works. I think it's awesome. Like the Harlequin feel to it. It reminds me a lot of Vince Venturalla's kind of Slaneshi colours, like this the magenta and the teal, like cyan type blue. Yeah, really, really great. I haven't got a massive amount of criticism for it because, you know, when it is this size, oh, like you say, mammoth task to do anything. So like the main jump out one for me really was to have a go at shading and highlighting the gold. Because that does look a bit flat, like compared to the rest of it, with all these beautiful shadows and, you know, clean transitions and stuff. Even between, like, not just a shadow and a highlight, but there's actual hue transitions as well. So they're really, really strong, and I think the gold is kind of letting it down a little bit in that respect. So getting like a brassy color and using that for the shadow would be good, and then obviously just mixing in some silver to get the highlights a bit brighter. That would be sweet. I think you do a little bit of. I mean, it's a huge amount of work, but like separating the freehand from the panel that it's on. In some places, it looks like there's a little bit of it here on this one, like a nice dark border. It doesn't necessarily have to be black. That could be a little bit too much. Maybe you could mix like black with, you know, like a dark brown or like a medium brown. Rhinox hide would probably be a good shout. Um, just to give it a little bit of a definition against where it's sat on the panel. So this corn snowflake or whatever it is, that looks like it's got some separation, but then this one on this armor plate here with this red skull, that doesn't seem to have it. So like I say, it's not everywhere, it's just somewhere, some places rather, like the white flames again, looks like it's missing it. So yeah, just that level of separation would be really, really useful, I think. And then again, a completely stylistic preference choice. It's a massive death robot. Maybe it should have some weathering. Sorry, even if it's just on like the lower legs and the feet, because 100% that would be taking damage, and they just look better, and it sells better for what it is when they're a little bit beaten up. Don't ruin it, obviously, because there's a load of awesome work that's gone in here. Just tiny scratches here and there, bit of dust, like dry brushing around the feet. You know, some of these brown tones, just dry brush them lightly around the edges. Just a little bit of something just to settle it on the base, because it's a very brown, green, neutral, you know, very nice. Nothing wrong with it at all, but just from like a color point of view, those are on the base, and then wow, you've got this vibrant like disco of colours going on up here. I get that you've got a red tuft and a red skull, yes, but just a little bit more integration into the base I think would be really helpful. But on the whole, I love what you've done with this thing, like the colour choices in general, the free hands, who gives a crap about the heraldry, it doesn't matter. Yeah, super work. So yeah, just brush up on that TMM, settle it down onto the base a little bit, and maybe a bit of separation in places on the freehand. But yeah, other than that, applause, Stephen. Well done. This thing looks great. Well done. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, great looking death robot. I always think as well, it's a little bit of a flex when you paint something really, really great and have this crisp edge highlight and just run a color across it, and then you put weathering over it like you don't give a shit. You're like, yeah, yeah. And it does look better. That's the whole thing. You kind of feel like, oh no, I can't cover this up. But like, obviously, you don't cover the whole thing up, and then the bits of it that are like, you know, really pristine look better again compared to the other bits. But like Jim said, minimal. You know, these Flaaneshi types probably take this thing and wax and polish it every afternoon. Um, so yeah, I think definitely it's cool. I agree with Jim on the biggest thing about it is the paneling, the way you've got this like run of purple and the blue, and then the fact that the purple and blue are in your freehand colors as well. It's really excellent. I just actually really love. It's almost like a color shift effect you've got going on. I'm going to give you the same advice that Vince gave to me when I submitted my Chaos Warriors way back when, and they had this kind of same kind of thing, panel modulation of freehand, and he said you should probably think about doing your freehand earlier in the process, and that's the same. James Waffle does the same thing. You know, start the freehand earlier than you think, because that way you can incorporate some of your shading on it. Because like that, like Jim was saying, to put a border around it and do kind of blend it in or separate it out, and that can be kind of tricky. But if you started doing the freehand kind of earlier, and then when you apply your shading across it, it already has this kind of run, and it tends to just make it look a bit more part of the piece. But like, you know, that's not a big deal. I think it looks more bedded down in the places that I'm guessing are like decals with like the flames on the legs and all the stripe work. But that might not be decals, but like I think that looks like more integrated and as well kind of defined as being part of the guy. And then also just have a little bit of a think about like, you don't have to put freehand everywhere. It's easy to get carried away, especially if you're doing Slaanesh. The idea is to get carried away. But you know, just do as much as you think is necessary for the good of the piece. Yeah, does that make sense? Great work overall. Such a radical. Radical is the best term for this, or righteous maybe. It just like really looks like something from 1988 kind of aesthetic of like cyberpunk kind of thing with those colors, but in the grimdark universe. So I think it's very, very cool. Next up, we've got Lucas Rittner, another first timer. Thanks a million. Thanks for hosting the great format. Well, we stole this format from the best of them, so you're welcome. Submitting Rocco and Rollo by Fig1 or Fig1. I'm never sure what they're called. Looking for feedback on the skin on the Beastio, trying to get more contrast and smoother on such a large model. Okay, so first of all, just a couple of things I really like about this piece. I love the way you've got the different skin tones between the rider and the beast, and they're like complementary to each other and makes them separate, but they also complement each other. That's really cool. I love the kind of blue green and the way you have the yellow green kind of hint on the skin on the beastie as well. And the base is just like awesome. Like this is just such a nice scenic base. Like those ferns look like real, like the fallen leaves and everything. It's super, super well done. Getting the kind of smooth, it is always tricky trying to get smooth but high contrast on your skin. I think it looks really good on like the thigh, on the back side of it. A couple other places, I think you're doing very well on it. I would kind of challenge you though in that it doesn't have to be like incredibly smooth. Like you could add some like little fine stippling texture in the highlights to show that like it has scales, but they're very small. If that makes sense. And that can be a good way even for human skin to get that really high contrast but smooth. There's a thing, glaze stippling. If you have all the patience in the world, where you use loads and loads of dots, but they're like quite translucent paint, and then the transparency of it kind of gives it a texture, but it's not like super visible. But like some of the most interesting pieces here are like around the knees and stuff, where it's got that wrinkly texture. And when you think of like a big animal like this, like it's the size of like a rhino or whatever, it's gonna have like crinkles and folds in its skin, even if it doesn't have scales. So like you don't have to go super smooth. And like even think about like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park has all this specular highlighting on its back that's shot in the rain because it looks cool. And then as well, you could also then show difference in texture, like on the tail where it goes to the blue. That could be smoother and like oilier or whatever. And then you could just have a highlight that's like conforms very strongly with the shape to show that it's like shiny or like wet or whatever. Just as an option. But I think it looks generally very good. Like you've got a good amount of travel in the skin, and having the two tones is a good look as well. Then the last thing, resin pores on the corners. Feedback on that. If you can avoid doing it, that's generally a bit easier, because obviously when you're doing resin and pore, you have two bits that are kind of connected and stuff can leak out and things. You might be able to try doing something where you like cut up like a plastic container that already has a corner to it. Or if you look up like woodworking YouTube tutorials, they do tons of stuff with resin, all sorts of crazy things with it. Like it is a nice look when I have it on the corner because you can see through it more. But like for this guy, you could have done it on the front and it still would have looked pretty cool. And it's a lot less like hassle for you in the end. So yeah, I haven't done a huge amount of work in resin, so I could give you a lot of feedback on it. My understanding is that it is kind of fiddly and annoying, and you need to like temporarily glue stuff in place and really make sure it's not going to leak out of there, because it's a nightmare when it does. But I think that kind of happens to everyone unless you're doing it a lot. Really great piece. Hopefully that's helpful feedback to you. I'm sure Jim has some more coming as well.
Not a lot, to be honest. Really, really like looking at this. Like the difference between the two skin tones, as Matt said, is really cool. I thought pretty much the only thing that's lacking on the skin really is just a deeper shadow, where you get to sort of the bottom of muscle structures. Something this big in this bright light would cast deeper shadows. Like look how dark it is under his tail. So like you could push some of these creases and folds a little bit further on Mr. Beastie. Oh, I'm zoomed right in there. But yeah, I think like the general smoothness of it is pretty good. It looks like you've used layering as the technique. Um, so I don't know if you obviously the easiest answer for smoothness is get and learn airbrush. That's like the quickest one, but not necessarily the cheapest or the easiest. If you're looking for something cheaper, then if you're dry brushing, make sure your brush is not dry. That was a massive help when I was learning to dry brush. Forgive me if you know this already, but sometimes you get a eureka moment. So it looks like a little bit of dry brushing has happened. So have a damper brush, not wet, obviously, but some coolness to it. That really, really helps. But I think the rider was like the contrast in his skin was better. He's got some deeper shadow going on, so that's nice. I did think maybe you could incorporate some like skin tones into it, like redness in the face, like around the nose, around the knuckles, like knee joints and stuff like that, like you've done on the Beastie. You've made that skin a different color. Do the same on his elbows, knees, ears as well, maybe a bit more pinky there. So that would be cool. But like, I think generally speaking, and the base is just absolutely glorious. I don't know what you struggled with, like with the corner. It looks like maybe it drops off a little bit and is going lower, maybe a little bit. But other than that, I thought the corner looks stunning. So yeah, well done with that. I thought it looked awesome. Yeah, nice one, Lucas. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much. Right, Jeff, we're kind of gonna slap your wrist a little bit here. This is kind of too much without any sort of pointed, like targeted feedback. This is far too much for us to kind of review, so I'll just do like a general on the whole lot, like where the majority of it is, and it's going to be the purple. So she's cool. That's nice. So with the purple, I know this is an awful lot of stuff that you've got to work through here, but it is looking like it needs some more highlighting and smoother like shading. Like if there's going to be one thing that you do to all of this to improve the look of it, like the highlight is very, very broad and it's very, very flat. There is some shading sort of going on, but it's also very rough. So just take your time with this stuff and see if you can get that a little bit smoother, and push the contrast as well, because you've got like two colors, like two tones of the color, when really you want at least three, if not five, really. And I know, again, this is a lot of stuff to work on. But that's going to be generally the rule to make it pop more on the table. Also, mold lines I've noticed a few of, so be careful of the mold lines. Fill those in with some sprue goo or liquid green stuff or varnish or something like that. That would be really cool. This one's clearly a whip, so can't say much about that. Those are whips as well, but it looks like you could just do with separating them a little bit better. That's kind of the other thing, really, is these clearly whips, so I don't know what you're going to do, what you haven't even thought of doing. So that's why we kind of can't really chat too much about it, to be honest. So, and what is going on here? Is this your palette, madman? So, yeah, but hopefully you can find some level of assistance in that, Jeff. Matt, did you want to add anything before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool looking army. Like it's got this. I love the way they're all like debauched jewelry people and like aristocrats. Very appropriate for Slaanesh. Jim said if you're submitting again, we're more welcome to have you. Just like pick one or two things that are well finished, and then you can extrapolate from there. The other thing I'd add is you got these guys with these glowing green hammers or like croquet mallets or something that they are. I don't know. It might be nice to have it because obviously green contrasts very strongly with your purple. So having just it on the end of the hammer is a bit like unbalanced, as we call it, in composition. So like if you had that hilt of it is glowing, or like their eyes were glowing that green as well, that'd just kind of help people from getting stuck just looking at the hammers as opposed to looking at the eyes. Very impressive workload for 1 month. Thanks for submitting, and hopefully we'll have you back again in the future. Nathan Klein's next. I think this is the second one. Was it diorama? Was it diorama last month? Can't remember. Apologies, Nathan. But anyways, diorama here, really great looking work. Anything you want to improve, always a good idea to have. Sketch day, 3D print. So yeah, this is really, really great work, I'd say. I love how, we fairly seldom see stuff that is like not sci-fi or fantasy. This is just like modern day, real life situation where you have these two guys who are passed out in a street corner in the middle of the street, and you had these paramedics or whatever coming out. I think it's really cool. I think the whole actual scene is extremely like professionally rendered. If that makes sense. Like it looks really like it could have been based on like a real street somewhere, and all the different elements. Like, oh yeah, you did the crow last month. Though. Yeah, so like everything from like the curbing works and the tarmac and all the stuff. It looks very like tidy and well put together. I really like it. And it's a cool like scene as well with the figures in it. So a couple of little pointers on the painting. I think that the having everything's quite grimy and decrepit looking. And it's great. It's like some rundown inner city place or whatever. But I think maybe the paramedics themselves could be a little bit cleaner. Like especially if we look at like the skin tone or the pants with a lot of washes and it looks like it's pooled a lot in places. So you can either want to kind of work your brush around while you're putting the wash on and sop up any excess to stop it from getting like really steep dark shadows under their cheekbones and things. Or if that does happen, you just go back over with your skin tone to like shave down the area so you get the shadow where you want it to be. I think you get away with it on like the drunks because it could be like like filth and stuff crusted to them. Poor guys. But you want your paramedics to be in their clean like uniforms and stuff. And then the other stuff I was going to say is very nitpicky, but obviously you're very good at building terrain. So I thought that the plaster on the walls was too thick. How's that for a nitpick right there? So like the brickwork behind it looks like amazing. It's super realistic looking. I know that's very hard to do, but like the actual depth that it's recessed by is like, if you think of it in scale, that's probably like 3 inches or something, which is a bit too much. And then the way the plaster has fallen off the wall isn't super realistic, where it looks like it's been cut out, whereas it would have like flaked off and it would have like pulled chunks in like a regular pattern. So if you look at reference for this, like there'll be bits where it's been kind of semi pulled off leading to it. And then have a think as well whenever you're making scenes. I always like to think of it like, how did it end up looking like this? So like, why did that particular piece of plaster fall off? Was it because of like water damage coming down from this pipe, and then it like, but then you'd think it would be more kind of linear and working its way along the pipe or whatever, or maybe like it fell off, but the pipe actually held on it. And then similarly, I think the graffiti looks really good. It looks really like actual graffiti. And I was a little bit confused. Well, again, this is very nitpicky, but you've got this lovely like stenciled on thing up at the top left, and it's kind of floating in space, and it raises the question of how these guys got up there to graffiti it. Like you need a ladder, or like you drop down from the top. If you look at real graffiti, like people either do it hang down from above, but the big thing for me was that the shop front, like the shutters aren't graffiti because they are always graffiti. If you look anywhere, because you can't repaint them. So if they get graffiti once, they're gonna always have graffiti in the future. So I think compositionally it works good having this big empty space here that has that over it. But in terms of if you're going for kind of realism, it doesn't necessarily. But those are very out there stylistic elements. So I think it's your work. So whatever one you go with, I think it looks really good. It's a great result in the end. And thanks for submitting to us, Jim.
Oh, comprehensive as always, Mr. O'Brien. Yes, the big one for me was the graffiti. Like, how the hell were they shimmying up the pipe? Were they standing on the slope? By the way, amazing sculpting work with everything. Absolutely stunning. Like, it's really, really convincing. Crisp, clean, well in scale. I thought it was brilliant. Really, really lovely. So besides what Matt's already said, there was only two things really to find fault with, and they are again incredibly nitpicky. You could probably just ignore them if you stylistically choose to. The first one would be that the foot of the turned around drunk is kind of floating, and I think it's more the paramedics rushing over to her for some reason because he seems slightly more conscious than her. I think it's a her. I'm assuming so. 2024. I can't do that anymore. Sorry. This one. So it might need just something to support this foot somehow, so it's not kind of floating in the air. But again, she might be moving, so maybe ignore that. And then the only other thing really was I loved how you did this, like the road paint. But more. There's loads of like unbroken road surface here, which you've done a fantastic job of like putting the greenery where it's like leaked from the pipe and then green growing out here, and the detritus and rubble and small micro texture, all brilliant. But I think you could have some more of this paint somewhere somehow, or like a drain cover or something else, just to break the road up a little bit more. Everything else is absolutely awesome, and as Matt said, you know, it's such a breath of fresh air to see a diorama like this. So it's like a random moment in time rather than some sort of iconic figure doing a heroic thing. You know what I mean? It's just a nice little scene, and the lighting on this, like compared to the crow in the forest last time, this is way more unified. Everything's, you know, painted like a much more sort of like well encapsulated environment, if that makes sense. It all looks like it's in the same place. So yeah, hats off, man. This is a really, really nice piece of work. Really, really enjoy it. So well done, thank you, and please come again. Moving up now to Kelsey. Finished this lovely mini. So glad to have it finished, but still love some CNC. Yeah, it looks cool, moody, like stealthy. I think it's a Space Marine of some description. Looks like it. Forgive me, I don't know who they are. So yeah, well separated. I like the way you've got some texture going on with the leather. I think you could probably take the tones of the leather a bit further in some places, make it a bit brighter because it is very dark. And so is the armor is all very, very dark. So yeah, you could just broaden some of this out a little bit. I like the texture you've got on there. That's cool, but like where these ridges and folds are, this is what I'm sort of talking about. Just sort of broaden these out and sort of brighten the tone of the leather a bit. That would be nice. Same goes for the armor. It's kind of flat black and then weathered and edge highlighted. So you could next time experiment with sort of bringing the black up through like the grey spectrum a bit and leave like 50% of the armor as black, and then it will still look like it's black. It will just look like it's sort of a little bit shinier or whatever. Give it a bit more contrast and highlight. I think it's a plasma weapon. Maybe a bit of colour in the plasma would have been cool. And then the base was very, very sort of grey. So I don't know if this is like fitting in with an army or what. I can see it's like you've done the deliberate like grey weathering on the cape. But if it's just kind of rocky like that, especially when it's like essentially a chromatic black figure as well, it's like it gets a little bit lost. So maybe something to just break it up. You know, you could just slip around some browns and greens and stuff just to give it a little bit more colour. Tufts, obviously, skulls, just something else going on with the base would be cool. Also, it's kind of high up. It's kind of built quite high up. I mean, I wouldn't change it on this one, but next time just be careful how high in front of your model you start building up the base, because it does just get to the point where it's kind of interfering, unless it's like an obvious piece of cover that they're hiding behind. But it's quite easy to do with like rocks and trees and, you know, rubble and stuff, is to just build it up too high and cover too much of your model. And I think you're kind of pushing it on this one a little bit. Still looks okay though, so I wouldn't change this. But yeah, maybe to just try pushing some colour around in the rock to make it a bit more varied. And then lastly, I thought the metals looked good, like the gold, like the hilt and the pommel on the sword's really nice. So well done there. And like this little red detail here on the sword was a nice touch to kind of marry it in with the other little red details you got dotted around. That looks cool. Then I think there was something to be said for thickness of paint. I think it was just on the inside of this cape, actually, to be honest. Forgive me if it's not. It might be like some dark, like some of your like weathering stippling. Yeah, it just looked like the paint was a bit thick just on that bit. It might not be the case. Do you know what I mean? It might just be the texture of the paint. Sorry, something microscopic just got into the paint and it's giving it unwanted texture rather than it being a bit too thick. I'm not too sure. It just didn't look quite as smooth as it did in other areas. Like on this part of the cape. So, yeah, just watch out for that one. But other than that, yeah, nice one, Kelsey. Thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I think Jim's given you a great rundown on all the painting bits and bobs. Lovely figure. Very, very grimdark, obviously. If you did want to do, this is just about the base, if you wanted to make, do more stuff on your base, like have more rocks and stuff, it can be cool when you're doing like a hero character or a captain or whatever, to like have them raised up so they're a bit taller than everyone around them. So then you could have like use cork or whatever to make the whole base as tall as this rock, and then have a guy standing on it. That'd be kind of cool. And then in terms of painting, yeah, like it looks like it's meant to be like cement or tarmac or something, but some sort of like red pigment or whatever, just to be like, oh, it's a rust or rebar in there. Just as Jim said, because you've got the kind of black and white armor, the gray for the base is a little bit, what's the word for it? Boring, I suppose, to be honest with you. It's just the way it is. Like, it's not necessarily unrealistic. You look at like a bombed out battlefield, everything's coated in dust and it looks very flat and it's hard to tell what's going on. But that's not what you want for your miniature figures. These guys are really cool. Great job. Hopefully that helps. Okay, we've got Sandro Prestige Universitario with some guys from Kingdom Death. Cool. So you got a few guys, and they're quite different to each other. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you one thing I liked and one thing I didn't like for each one. Hopefully that's helpful to you, because they aren't. Two of them are kind of similar scheme or whatever. So starting off with the Butcher, I think he's really cool. I really like the way you have done the all the little lanterns and pouches and all the little accoutrement on his back. I think it looks great. And you kind of selling that idea that there's glass in there and different materials without going into super OSL, which is kind of a rabbit hole which can be annoying to deal with when it comes to Kingdom Death. The thing I don't really like is his armor on the front, like the shoulders and the chest, because it looks very like it's not painted, which is weird. Like it looks like you painted it the color of like miniature plastic. So like the metal for the cleavers and stuff is much more like an NMM kind of look to it, whereas it might be that the light is blowing it out in your photograph, but it looks like it's just like kind of solid gray, and even like the little divots and stuff don't have a shade in them. So I think you can definitely have more contrast in those armor panels, and possibly some color in there if you want to add like rust or what have you as well. Then going down, we've got the Hand, I think he's called, this dude with the brain. I really like the kind of rich red you've got on him, and I like the gold on his belt buckle. I think it looks very good. And I think the brain itself could have a little bit more definition in the creases, and maybe a little bit more like of a red hue, like as if there's like blood in there as well. So just like some like light wash of like a red ink or something. Could help do both of those things. Next guy is the King's Man, who I have painted myself. I really like the kind of embroidered cape and the plume that he's got on his head. I think the steel metal sells quite well, especially on the helmet and on the feet. I think the gold doesn't have the same kind of maximum highlight that the steel has or shadow, and it doesn't need to be everywhere, because this is a problem you run into with a figure like this who's like in armor. Like the reason your steel looks good is because you've got the whole helm is light, and then there's other areas that are all shadowed, and that makes sense because they're literally in shadow. So the gold just needs to have, say, on the shoulder pad or on the crown bit, going up to like a bright ivory line and having like a mahogany kind of dark tone, and I think that would kick it up a notch there. And then the other two I have basically no notes on. I feel look really good. They've got this kind of like stylized look. They almost look like they're Street Fighter, the first guy, or no, Tekken. I think that's Kazuya Mishima. I don't know if that's like on purpose, but they're very kind of like washed out. Yeah, very washed out, but also quite clean looking. And it's like I like the way you've done like that thing on their bases where you broke up some of the face bases to give them some bases on their bases. So I don't think there's much of anything I improve on those guys, but maybe Jim would have a different opinion. Jim?
I'm in the same park for all of it. So Butcher, yeah, shadow contrast. I think that would make the medals look an awful lot better. Also, as I said in the previous one, maybe a bit more colour and variation to the rocks. But like the fur and the other textures and the stuff are all much nicer on the Butcher. Then Hand, yeah, I think it's going to be the same for all the golds. I think you need more highlighting on your NMM gold. Like it's got a good enough shadow in a lot of places, but I think in general you need to push the highlights of the gold, and it would look much better. Like the red is a very rich, vibrant red. I love that. That's really, really cool. The textures that you've got on the bases as well are really nice. There is some evidence of dry brushing been left, so maybe just like getting some glazes in to soften that down afterwards would be a nice touch. And then for the skin, I thought you could just use some more tones in the skin. Really, it just looks like it needs like some more redness in the face around joints like elbows, knuckles. You know, a little bit more color underneath, like where things are shaded. Just a little bit of hues. It just looks quite lifeless. It's very smooth and like they're nice like Caucasian tones, and that's good. But it's just missing like the life in the skin, and that comes from those rosy red and pink tones in it, like, especially on the female skin. So yeah, they look really good overall. So thank you, Alessandro. Then moving up to this cool piece, like Moonlight Camplight bust from Brandon. Drow in the moonlight. So just looking for a bit more critique to carry on. Just looking to know what could be improved, specifically those struggling with the iron armor pieces on his left shoulder, which is why they look more whip. How would you render them? So I think you've done a really, really great job so far. Well done. This is a hard thing to do. To have this kind of moonlight campfire two-tone lighting situation going on, and I think you've had a really, really good smash at it. Really nice. Like the placement of highlights and shadows is really good. Like the temperature of the OSL is mostly perfect, I would say. There's just a small disparity like when you get further away from the light source. So down up to about here, I'd say it's all perfect. Anything above his like chest line, I think is too close in tone. It's actually like a lighter tone than what's down here. This needs to be moving more towards your reds. Excuse me, red end of the spectrum. So anything that's up on his face under this arm here, you know, that needs to be very, very red by the time it's up here. This is still the same orange that's way down here. So, but I love like the yellow tones you've got, and like where you've got the orange and like the occlusion shadow. This is all working. This section down here is awesome. Really, really nice. Then for the armor on the back, it's kind of it kind of looks unpainted because it's not reflecting the moonlight. Like his skin is really blue, which you'd expect. That's all correct. That's all fine. Looks really good actually, but like the armor isn't doing that. So the easy way to do this would be to treat this as like a sky earth NMM type approach. So paint it in the NMM style. Anything that's facing upwards would be blue, and anything that's coming from underneath would be like red and brown, like those reflections from the firelight. That would be the only way to do it. Like this is kind of like cold grey at the minute, which it wouldn't be in either of these lighting situations, which is why it doesn't look like it's like cohesive with the rest of it. So you've got to bring those same colours into the armour. They would reflect those lights just the same as the skin would. And the same for the blade as well. Like the blade just looks like, I'll be really harsh, it just looks grey. Apart from this like edge highlight that's got a bit splotchy here. Be really aggressive with the shadows on this. So there would be, I mean, I love this highlight, this bright highlight here, that's great, but you still need some blue around the edges of that. And then where it's going to shadow, that needs to be super aggressive. And then this side of the blade wants to be pretty much all black, I'd say. And then just a few of those like fiery tones in it. But again, very, very soft. So down here would be like yellowy and orange, but soft. And then up here, there would be like a red reflection. And maybe a little bit in the public, maybe a tiny little bit, because this face is literally facing straight down. So yeah, wrap that fire effect around here a little bit so it can affect the armor. It would obviously affect the skin a little bit on this side too. Great job with the white hair. I think that looks great. I don't think you need to do much with that really at all. That looks super duper, like picking out individual strands. Like it looks like a photo, to be honest, from here. That's like some really, really strong hair work there. Really, really great. Yeah, did I have anything else? Maybe just tint the hair a little bit more blue on the front was the only other thing that I had. But like the whole attitude of the piece, the lighting has been beautifully captured. Like the red eyes is a nice choice as well. So yeah, great stuff, Brandon. Really enjoyed looking at this. Thank you very, very much indeed for sharing. Matt?
Yeah, totally. It's a very, very good stab at a very, very hard subject matter because obviously painting like a drow, they're like the white hair and black skin, so that's like difficult to render. And then having it be in moonlight, which is difficult to render, and also torchlight, which is difficult to render. So I think you've done, especially from the front view, like it looks spectacular. And then it always becomes kind of challenging in other areas because, like that, we're setting up like if it was a photo shoot, we have the lights in front, and then you have to figure out how it's going to work from behind, side, and then they can kind of interfere with each other. But yeah, just that front view really makes me think of like that novel, The Homeland, where the dark elves burst out and they murder all these wood elf people. So that's exactly the kind of scene that is conjuring. On the NMM, yeah, like Jim has said, it's just not painted as much. That's why it looks like whip. Like you could obviously paint NMM. Paint is right. His bracer in the front isn't facing the moonlight, like so. It has still secondary bounce lights on it from somewhere. Paint his shoulder pad in the back, exactly like that. You could even do it like this is a rare example where the bust could look as cool from the back because the way he's holding his sword and winding up like that. And you could just be like, "There's another torch." Maybe that doesn't make sense for your scene, but maybe there's like a burning building behind them, or whatever. So you could just be like, there's another light source also illuminating him, also from beneath here, and just do it the exact same way. Yeah? Or it could be like the torchlight is hitting something behind him, someone behind him, and you have a fainter torchlight bouncing back. And then similarly, the moonlight. Like, obviously, moonlight doesn't bounce around like that because it's super weak, but you have made the moonlight really intense so we can see what's going on. So we're going to imagine that the moonlight can bounce around like that and give you your secondary reflections in the rear of the piece. And then just generally, this isn't like you can ask for this, but I would just say think very, very, very carefully when you're doing this about exactly where your light source is. Someone once said to me, you can like close one eye sometimes because you have different picture from like both sides of your vision. You'd be like, where is touched by this light and where is not? Because in some places it looks like it's coming from like an angle like this, but then in some other views it looks like it's coming both and from the side. Like if you look at his like left arm in the rear view, like it's lit up all the way down here, which tells us the light is coming literally this way on, but that's not the way it's coming in front. If that makes sense. And yeah, again for the sword, just do the same thing. It looks really convincing now. The point, the pommel on the other side looks really convincing, but you just need to have put it to black and then put your secondary reflection there. And also remember, you've got a bit of it on the front where it looks like his right bracer is warmer, but your reflections have to be the light that's there. So as Jim said, it can't be just this black gray tone. It's got to be reflected firelight or moonlight because those are the only light switches that are in your scene. But really great work on a really, really challenging piece, and like trying to get it to look right from all angles is like master level stuff. So I wouldn't sweat that too much at all. Next up, we have another wonderful bust from Michael Smith. You're very welcome. We're always happy to give feedback on stuff. Thank you for submitting. This is a wonderful looking piece. Trying to get that idea of cold skin and a light from up front. Well, I'd say A+. This looks exactly like she is being lit from the front. Like she's like, I can imagine her like coming to the door of her crypt. She was reading her vampire romance novel, didn't expect you to ring at the door, and came out with her cat or whatever, and the light is streaming in front. So yeah, cold skin, it works really, really well. I think the way you've got the contours, like in the face, where it goes to these like it's like cold on cold almost, where it's warmer highlights, but it's not actually warm, and it sells that idea that she's like dead. And it goes to this really grey all around the sides. I think it's really, really cool looking. And the way you have that in the robe as well, where it's like it comes up to this reddish purple, but that's still kind of neutral, but it goes to a blue purple on the underneath. Very, very strong overall. And even the way like the tears are almost kind of cold looking as well. I think that there's a little bit of an issue with the cat here, which is that it's much warmer looking, which I assume means that like, it's a living cat, which is like fine. But like literally the color it is like sunny skin tone, which is very, very warm. And it doesn't look like it's lit the same way. Whereas if you look at like its tail, it like wraps around under, but like underneath of it is almost as bright as the top. Whereas you've got way more travel on her arm. And especially if you look like where she's holding it, it looks kind of weird where it's poking out and it looks like it's like closer to us or like it's almost 2D because it's not shaded the same way her hands that are on either side of it are. I think again, here a really cool feature you got here, and is having the cast kind of semi-casting the shadow where the highlight on her like left arm is further forward because it's there. But I think the cat could just have more colder shadows, sort of in a lot of places, like where her arm is overlapping it, and just all the undercut sort of areas to make it feel more like it's in the same light as she is, because at the moment it's a little bit off. Um, then on the lady herself, the other things I was thinking was that her left hand again looks a little bit less cleanly rendered than the other one, especially around the fingernails. And then it looks like in the sculpt, her nose goes like straight into her forehead, kind of thing. But if you run your hand up your nose, you'll notice it gets stuck here because your like nasal bone goes like in slightly before your brow bone comes out. So just a very light shadow there would be appropriate for the lighting scheme you've got going on. You can do a lot of stuff to make expression using that shadow for like browns and creases and stuff, but just having it, because at the moment, like it looks like her face runs straight down, which it probably does in Skull, but just make it have a little bit of a shadow there. That should look a bit better. And then again, the back is pretty boring. Like there's not a lot going on. That's fine. If you wanted to make it more interesting, you could just have another light source. Again, be like, and she's just lit from the back as well. As long as they don't overlap, it'd be fine. Or you could go wacky and have some like big blue glowing room in the back of her that's casting light everywhere. It's like scintillating through her hair and things. But I don't think anyone's gonna hold you over the coals for that. It's a really, really good looking piece. I really love this kind of vampire aesthetic you've got going on. I think it's executed really, really well. Jim?
Yeah, I agree. Really nice, like pallid. Definitely looks dead, like undead. Like the skin, it's good. I would probably suggest pushing the highlights a little bit, just to make it look a little bit more waxy. Like it looks quite flat, like matte, like she's like wearing makeup like everywhere, but she clearly isn't. So like dead skin's a little bit pallid and waxy, isn't it? So like a little bit more like sheen highlight here and there would be good. Using green in some places, like towards the shadows, I think you've done, which gives it like a sickly feel. If you haven't, then obviously, I see you've used it in the eyes. But yeah, green's a really good way to paint cold skin. Not like vibrant green, obviously. I'm trying to think of a good example of one. Vallejo have got a skin color called Dead Flesh, and it's perfect for that. Yeah, working that into the shadows and midtones is a really nice way to make dead skin a bit more vibrant. I agree with Matt on the back. Like, what else could you do? I think you could probably still push the highlights a little bit. Probably, if anyone's got it in their hand, they're going to go, yeah, hair, okay. They're going to know that it's done like hair, but still, I'd push some of the sheen highlights on the hair in some places. The cat for me is a huge problem, I'm afraid. And I hate to say it because it's painted really, really nicely, but that's all I see because it's so bright and so saturated, and she's so, like, grey in comparison, and she needs to be honest. So I think the cat should just be a completely neutral colour, to be honest. So you can keep like the vibrant colour in the robes and the lips, and obviously around the eyes has got the same sort of colour. So like you're doing all the right things to like bring the attention up there. But then you've got this basically a golden cat, and it's like all of the attention is coming down here to Mr. Tiddles. So personally, I probably would have painted that cat black or some other very dark grey tone with a pattern in the fur or something to make it a bit more interesting, because there's not really much you can do up here to contest with that size of this cat in scale with the rest of the piece being this bright and this saturated. And it is struggling. So the only other thing you could do really is do some like mad red streak like through some of the hair to like frame the face and bring a bit, but it have to be super bright and super saturated to bring the attention away from this grumpy cat. Oh, and I like how you did green eyes for both of them in the way. That is cool. But yeah, I just think there's way too much attention down here at the moo. But yeah, beautifully rendered clothes and hair as well, so I got to point that out, and the little red ring. So yeah, a lot of stuff really, really good here, Michael. But yeah, unfortunately, he got to be darker or more natural, I'm afraid, that cat for me. But yeah, nice one. Thank you for submitting, Michael. Moving up to this beastly thing from Kelvin. another KDM miniature. Focus on speed painting. So I think you did the lion last time, wasn't it? That golden lion thing from Kingdom of Death, I think last month. Did it in like 5 hours or something. So you haven't said this time how fast this was, but again, speed painting, and to get it to this and call it speed painting is awesome. So well done for that. Just looking for overall feedback, mostly focusing on the face and attempts at drawing the eye to important parts rather than having it unfocused. So yeah, I think you did a great job with that. It's got a great finish on it. It's very, very matte, like very, very matted down, and everything's very crisply defined. Like in the feathers, like what a sculpt this is, and like the detail. And I think you've done a great job of keeping some of it like really, really deeply in shadow, and then bringing some of it back out on the feathers. That's really good. Attention is definitely in the right place for me, like towards the face, the head, like the flesh parts of it, and you've got some really, really nice, unusual tones in the flesh, which gives it a lot of interest. So that's really cool. It's just a great sculpt, really. I might try and get my hands on one of these. It looks awesome. Like bright dot in the eye, like the teeth are a really good tone as well. So I'm enjoying pretty much everything I look at this. The only thing that I thought could do with a little bit more is the base. To be honest, there's not really much going on like with the base. I get that it's kind of a desolate wasteland that it's in, but I still think some of the details could be picked out, like the edges of the rocks and some more of these ridges, and you could have bits of bone or skull or something remains laying around underneath it, just to kind of like underline the menacing feel behind the sculpt. I mean, there's like bits of body like in its wings and like in its mouth. So I just feel like incorporating some of that down into the base would kind of settle it down a little bit better and break up this large dark surface that is the base. But yeah, like it's a moody piece in a moody setting, and I think you've done a really, really good job of it. Like there's an awful lot of brown like on the wings, but I guess this is probably there's reference art that you've gone to for this, so there's not much you can really do about that. So yeah, I think the level that you've taken the wings to, like with the like soft dry brushing, is good. But you could maybe just push some of the wing structures a bit darker just to shape it a little bit more, like especially on this sort of rump bit here. Just like push some darker tones around to give it the structure rather than like highlight it further, if that makes sense, because it kind of take away from the dingy kind of grim dark feel of it. So yeah, there's that. And then I think the only other thing I had was I thought I saw a mold line like on the beak, on the head here. So just maybe watch out for that next time. Like that's a very, very thin one, so varnish should be a great way to get rid of that. Couple of rounds of gloss varnish and then matte, file it down a little bit if needed. But yeah, other than that, really, really cool, menacing, scary thing. Yeah, attention in the right place and very nice atmospheric lighting on the whole thing. So well done, Kelvin. Thank you very much. Matt?
Yeah, great success, I would say. Very moody, very atmospheric. And I've seen this thing in real life. Its wings, like each one is like the size of your hand. So it's like extremely daunting to figure out like, it's going to cast a shadow and all sorts of stuff. How do you deal with painting this? And I think you've done a really great job. It's got real like horror movie lighting to it, I'd say, where there's like bits of it are lit up, and they don't necessarily make like they're lit up where it needs to be lit up to make it like well defined, as if it was in a horror film and someone put lights around, rather than having, and it's in the dark otherwise. And I think that's really, really effective. And you've done a super good job of throwing the tension into the face, which is what you want to do. So the only thing I'd say, maybe the tongue is a little bit too red. Like obviously you've done that to be like maximum saturation, maximum warmth here. Look at this tongue, but I don't think it needs to be quite that red because it's already the warmest, most saturated thing on there. Might be nice to have a little bit of like red brought into like the old man face that's in the beak for some reason. Just to like draw our eye in there, because I think those kind of oranges pustules you've done in the armpits of the wings, they're already drawn the eye into the middle, and having like that really gross pale skin tone around the beak, it's drawing loads of attention there already. So you could have the tongue be a little bit darker, more kind of natural tongue color, and then maybe do something just to have like draw a little bit of attention into the old man face there if you wanted to. But I think it's really, really good. One of the best painted versions of this I've seen, definitely. Thanks for submitting. Hopefully that was helpful to you, Kelvin. Next we got Simon, second time submitting. Another bust, another go at fancy lighting of some description. Cool. Yeah, I immediately knew without your illustration what the lighting situation was, because so that's good straight away. You're like, there's a red light from here, there's a white light from overhead. I think that I like the just general. So there's just some general things I like. I think the skin is really well done. I think the eyes are really well called out, and the hair. I think the weapon in the right hand looks really good. I'll have some comments on the weapon in the left hand in a minute. And I think, yeah, that idea of having this red light from below is very Frank Frazetta, sort of Conan the Barbarian in an evil temple adventure kind of thing going on. So really great work on all that. I think some of your photos, see, this can happen as well. When you do this setup, you have differential lighting and figure, your camera does auto color correction, and that can be problematic because if we look at like some, say the photo where you have the lights drawn in, the colors on the left arm are very different from like the same picture basically from earlier on. So you kind of have to be careful how you take your photo, because like if the figure is primarily red from one angle, your camera will adjust the light balance and the color balance to make that red less apparent and make everything else bluer consequently. So just watch out for that. So in terms of taking that into account, I'm going to say based on what I can see in the pictures, because it might look like different in your hand. I think that the left arm is a little bit confusing in terms of the light situation, because you have a light that comes down and illuminates his shoulder pad, and then his knife is really well lit up with that overhead light, but then his left arm is not lit by that because it doesn't have that cold look to it that all the skin on his face and on his other arm has. So like that kind of raises the question, like, okay, I could understand if he's being lit by a light from here and then like a spotlight from here, but then also why is his knife lit? Why is there another spotlight in there? The idea is that he's like leaning forwards into darkness, and the only thing that's illuminating that left arm is the red light. Then the left arm should be much darker because there isn't any like light there to give it its normal color, if that makes sense. And then as well, it gets a little bit confusing because I start saying, or is it that his skin tone is this pinkish color, and then the light from above is really cold, and that's making his other arm look much gray bluer in comparison. So yeah, that again could be related to photos as well. I think that the knife itself, the lower knife as well, could have way more of that red light in it. If you're saying like it's basically in the dark, like you've got a little bit of it at the point where it's facing down, but you know there's a bunch of like hooks and crevices and weird stuff on it that would reflect that red light, and also you can kind of cheat it and be like it has like a big splash of red light up along it, to say like it was somehow in the path of that light. And then as well, I think the red light probably like it sells very well in the face. More on the chest, it looks a bit orangey because I think what you've done is you've incorporated some of the yellow tone of the armor into it. But again, if there's no white light incident on his armor, the armor can only be red because the light is red. So it can't reflect yellow as well because there's no yellow to be reflected. If that makes sense. And the reason it works better kind of on his face is because you have this like sort of a bit of a terminator, as it's called, where the main light wraps around to a certain point to go into shadow, and then you have red light coming up instead, replacing it. And that's kind of where you want to be going. But again, very well rendered piece, very difficult lighting situation to set up. And I think it's definitely like it's a step forward from the last one as well. Not that the last one wasn't a great piece as well, but it's really like leaning into that sort of a situation we're familiar with of having this red light from beneath. I think that's a good way to work on your NMM stuff. Also, you might be able to cheat as well and have some. Looks like you have a bit of the red in the right hand blade, but more of it up there because again, it should probably have literally a dot of red somewhere because there's like a point source of this red light over there somewhere. That would make sense. But if you make it small, it won't look out of place to have like a dot of red on your metal over here because it's part of the scene. But great looking elf dude as well. Jim, do you have anything you want to add in there?
Yeah, it's definitely an improvement. On last month, it does look better. Like the white lighting situation coming down, I think is quite convincing. So the hair highlights, the face highlights, the armor, and all that. That's all looking really good. For me, the red one though, it looks like it's a very like thin, narrow channel of light that's affecting his torso. Lower down, sort of like around the abs, like on the left and the right sides, there seems to be no like interaction at all. But then when you come up on the chest, like the light sort of does this, and it's affecting like a T-shaped pattern, which didn't really sit like it was, selling as well as like the brighter stuff on the top. I get that there's a nice piece. I'll see if we can catch it on the video. There's a nice like reflection on the inside of the arm. Excuse me. But like, yeah, there's no red light here or here, but then it's all the way down there. So it's kind of, it's not behaving in the way the light does. It just goes in all directions, if you see what I mean. So there's just like a little bit of that OSL is kind of missing from here. It did look quite convincing on that side of the blade, on that, where's the picture? The other side of that blade in his right hand. So that's very convincing OSL under there. That's cool. So yeah, but then there's this green bit of cloth that comes down here that's not affected by it either. But it's like there's a tiny little bit here. But how is this being affected when this is so much closer to it, and it's directly in the path of the light? So you see what I mean? This is very thin channel, then it goes up and it spreads. It's just a little bit weird how it's rendered sort of under here. And then the other thing that I thought you could probably do straight away to improve this is do away with that rough wooden base, because it's actually really noisy. There's a lot going on there. It kind of looks like, I mean, it's a cool base. I like it as a plinth. But this one looks loads better. Like this black metal one. I think it's metal. If it's plastic, forgive me. But that looks loads better, because there's so much going on with this wooden one. Like, you expect it to be part of the scene and be like reflecting the lights that the model is. You see what I mean? It kind of looks a bit like it's terrain, but it isn't. And try and have a smooth pin as well. I think we're better rather than a screwed one. So yeah, I think that whatever you're doing, like with that black one, that looks loads better. And you've obviously got some sort of red light on it as well that's reflecting it. You've not painted that on. So it's kind of a little bit difficult to tell what's going on with the red light, because it appears to be reflected on this sword now. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky one. And then watch out next time you're doing NMM. Try not to have this like checkered pattern, like highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow, very, very predictably across the whole thing. Shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. Like the same spacing and the same size. Try and make it a lot more random and sort of swooping. Sort of some of the highlights are really broad. Some of them are really tiny. You get areas of deep shadow where nothing's going on really apart from interference light. And then obviously you'd have like secondary highlights. So you've got like the lights bouncing around, but yours are all sort of the same size and spaced the same as well. So try and randomize it. That makes NMM sell an awful lot better. But I like the colors that you've used for it. It's cool. So yeah, and really nice work with the like the eyes as well. They're rendered really beautifully. So nice job with that. It's tricky stuff you're taking on, Simon. Very, very tricky. So fair play to you. Hats off. Come again. Show us more. Thank you very much. Then up to Christian. Thank you in advance. Well, you're very welcome. Looking for general feedback on strengths and weaknesses. Really working on brush control and cleanliness and doing extremely well. This looks lovely. Nice, fun, vibrant, bright piece. And there's some really, really tricky things to paint in here, and I think you've done brilliant. But like the overall thing I get from this is it's so playful. Like you don't see this a lot, like with minis. Where it's always quite serious and quite gnarly, and the grim future is all but war. You know what I mean. But like this playful, mischievous pumpkin assistants that are just like spilling potions, drinking them, yanking on her clothing, buggering about, but she's not like turning around and looking to smash them. She's just like, don't stop. Do you know what I mean? It's just really playful, and I really like it. So I really like what you've done with the skin. You've rendered that, like, got the pink tones in there really, really nicely. You could maybe push the highlights a bit higher, like on upper surfaces, but in general, I think it's really nice skin. The purple's got some lovely travel in it, so as the reds and the pinks. You know, there's great level of contrast. There are brush strokes, yes, but I think you can it sort of sells as like a painterly kind of style. So it's actually quite a nice thing. It's good brush control, I'd say. A lot of it, really, really nice. The only exception, and I think anyone could be forgiven, is this is like this fishnet pattern. Like, what a nightmare that is to paint. I don't know how you did it, but it looks like you've just actually used the brush and gone in and done all that sort of individually. So fair play to you. That is going to be really, really difficult to keep that ultra, ultra crisp. So I can only applaud the effort. It's really, 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 really good stuff. Micro details like that, what you've done for the texturing in the wood and in the stones and stuff, like the level of contrast and travel across the whole thing's really, really good. So I haven't got much more like pushback on anything. Like the hair could do with some more sort of sheen highlights on some of the where it wraps round and faces up. So I'd probably go with like around this edge here and here and here, and around that edge could go with like a really bright, really, really bright highlight. I think the medals are pretty good. You could just shade them like towards the bottom a little bit darker to give them a little bit more life. Just a little bit darker towards the bottoms, but in general, I think they're selling and they look quite convincing. So nice one. And like the green glass and the blue glass, you know, it definitely looks like the material that you're going for. So you've rendered it really nicely. So yeah, really enjoyed this, Christian. Thank you very much. It's a lovely, lovely piece. So well done. Thank you very much. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, fabulous looking, absolutely gorgeous witch lady. Agree with everything Jim said. So nice to see this, like, just super fun. Like the way you painted it, like really complements the scene where it's like this kind of like koopy sort of witch's kitchen kind of thing. I love the way you've got like the blue potion or it's water, and it's like, yeah, this is cartoon. Maybe it's meant to be like literally blue, or maybe you've just said in this universe water's blue because it's cartoon, it'd be colored in like literally blue. And I think it's like a really nice like little subtle touch in there. Skin is definitely the strongest part overall. It's really, really popping. You could maybe have like a little tiny highlight, shoulder, T-zone kind of thing, but it's super great, really smooth, lovely tones, great travel, uh, and like really nice use of all these crazy eye-popping, vibrant colors that all works together and doesn't like just look like a gaudy mess, which is very commendable. Totally agree with Jim. Like if there was two things I'd say you could improve, would be the hair, be number one, and the gold NMM kind of thing not so much because like it has a decent amount of travel to it, but not quite as much. A little bit more, and you'll get to that like cartoonish gold color, which I think is what you want. And actually, if I look at like the like buckety thing that these pumpkins are grown out of, it's got like brass bands, and I'm like, I would just do that on your wristbands, and then that would be like 100% for me. But the hair, it's kind of tricky because you've got so much hair. You know, it's not really super realistic to have such a huge volume of hair. But just look up. Just you want to do it like ribbons, where it's like if it's an S shape, you get a highlight in the the like wrapped over bit, and then a secondary one in like the creased under bit as well. And you could also, because she's got so much hair, think about like putting like a streak in there, or like gold or like highlights or whatever, just to break it up, make it a bit easier. Because when you have a big area of brown, like you end up to make it interesting, having it have a lot of value contrast, but then that can end up looking too distracting when if like her hair has like white highlights in it, and that's not what you want. So just adding a little bit of some extra kind of playful color in there, I think it really really take that piece up to that like final competition standard, which I think pretty much everything else in this piece really is. And if you're going for brush control, again, kudos to you for picking Lady in Fishnet Stockings. Like, literally, that's probably like the acid test of brush control. If we ever release that, it's like, yeah, we have our tiers, and like A tier is like Lady in Fishnet Stockings, and then S is like Lady in Fishnet Stockings and like transparent under stockings or something like that. But yeah, great work overall, Christian. Thanks for submitting. And then what a way to finish up. We've got news from Daniel Liu that so I'm just gonna basically ramble a little bit so Jim can show off these amazing pictures to our audience. So long story short, I've won the Best in Show at Taiwan International Model Open Competition. I'm really grateful for all the feedback you gave. Here's a reworked version of it. So this is the final version that was submitted and won the Taiwan International Model Open Competition. Absolutely fabulous looking piece, Daniel, on every possible frontier. You know, you've taken what we said, completely exceeded our expectations. I personally really like how the kind of you've reworked the tones on the light on the ground, and now it totally reads, as you said, as it's the lantern is what's the affected light from the lantern. Just having that slight orange tint to it completely recontextualized it. And then didn't even think about it myself, but I think you've switched the eyelids. Were they open before and now they're closed? But it's super cool looking the way you've got all this color on the Oni's face, but it's not drawing too much attention away from the lady. And then having that like little pattern on the lantern as well. Like that's like, you know, we're gonna call that like the Daniel Liu signature, where you just have like it's a stunning piece to look at from a distance, and like every single bit of it, you go in, you're like, oh, there's something cool there to figure out. Like every opportunity is seized to be like, why couldn't this lantern be an OSL source and have a cool freehand eye? So amazing. Congratulations, well deserved win. I'm sure Jim would like to tell you that he loves it too.
I do, and I get what you say now about like the alternative colour for the horns. Fine, we thought there might have been like a reason behind it. Yeah, picking out things. You know, the hair, like how this highlight is working from the front of this hair. I don't remember that being such a poignant thing before. Like the freehand light brightening up the lantern. Yeah, you were right. It's definitely worth doing. 100%. Like, it's just a gush. The whole thing is just a gush. We absolutely love it. Congratulations. Well done. This is definitely one for a nice little glass dome to protect it for all time, seal it away, and yeah, be very, very proud of this for all of the days that remain, because it is an absolute masterpiece. So well done again, Daniel, and please come again next time. Fabulous work. And that's the end, isn't it, Matt?
Yep, we're done. Truly stunning. Thanks very much to everyone who submitted for April. We'll have the event up for May on Facebook as soon as I get the chance. Look forward to seeing you again in the future.